So like one big thing that we do with OpenHands is we benchmark it with, literally hundreds of different models to get a sense for how accurate is that model, how much does it cost, how fast is it. We've got that agent control plan to really give organizations and leaders visibility into what's going on, where are they spending money, and where is it actually driving value. I mean, I would say you have to start at this point. Like I know of almost no company that hasn't adopted agents at some level of scale. I think the trend we're really seeing is that more and more is getting automated without like a human co-pilot, right? Where the human's stepping back more and more from kind of like manually piloting one-to-one with an agent and more kind of supervising fleets of agents.
Why do you think people actually were ready to contribute rather than using something that is already on the market, proprietary, or build their own?
I would say a few things. One is that this is a tricky technology to build by yourself. We can constantly be doing experiments like that and making sure we're actually optimizing for the cost and benefit that we get from different models.
How hard is it for you to draw the line? What stays free and what is paid?
I think it's very important as an open source company to be very clear with your community where that line is.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Prime News series of interviews with top business and technology experts. Today I'm delighted to welcome Robert Brennan, who is CEO and co-founder at OpenHands, open source platform for coding agents. Yeah, so Robert, as I said, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. If you could maybe walk us through a little bit about through your career and tell us what was exactly that moment when you realized that AI agents can solve real engineering problem rather than just autocomplete code.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, my background's in a mixture of natural language processing and developer tooling. I got my degree in machine learning with a concentration in linguistics, and worked at Google for a few years doing things like document summarization and question answering back in the pre-LLM days when those were still hard problems to solve. And then I got really interested in DevTools. I found I really liked building things that make other people more productive. I like giving them things and seeing what they build, and it just gives me a lot of energy. So I worked in REST APIs for a little while, and then I worked in the Kubernetes ecosystem. And had a blast doing that. But I was watching, it would have been 2023, seeing ChatGPT emerge and just seeing how good it was at writing code. And I was kind of blown away. It started with me, just prompting inside of the ChatGPT chat interface, like, can you write some SQL to do X, Y, and Z? And it just nailed it. It totally crushed it. I had to adapt it a little bit for my particular use case. But it was amazing to see it just write syntactically correct code that just worked on the first try. For a while my workflow was essentially, typing into ChatGPT, getting some code, pasting that into my IDE, getting an error message, pasting that back into ChatGPT, and just kind of doing this copy paste back and forth. And I realized pretty quickly this is a dumb use of my time. I can automate this. I know ChatGPT has an API. So I built a little CLI tool for myself to just do that loop of, copy in the source code, run some command, see what happens, paste the output back to ChatGPT, and basically a very early version of that agentic loop built on top of an LLM. And I could do some really interesting things. I could do this cool iterative process. It became very clear to me that software development was going to be changing very, very quickly. And so in early 2024, when Cognition announced Devin and started showing off demo videos of this fully automated agent that could, not just write code, but run the code that it wrote, Google an error message that came out, really doing the whole inner loop of development. My co-founder and I got together and we were immediately like, okay, this is clearly the future. We started an open source project now called OpenHands. It was originally called OpenDevin. And we just started building it. The community really rallied around us. They clearly agreed. I think everybody was really excited about what the future of software development might look like, but also kind of worried that it was going to happen in a black box, right? That other companies were going to be telling them how to work. And we really wanted to give the community something to build together, right? To give software engineers a say in how their jobs were going to change. And that's what really brought the OpenHands community together, is this idea of coming together to reimagine what software development looks like.
That's an amazing story, and so what really strikes me here, that you come from the engineering background, you saw the potential, you kind of played with the new technology, you saw the, like, you built the community around you. Right now, I know that OpenHands has this incredible boost in popularity. There are over 70K GitHub stars, engineers pour their knowledge, their energy, and their time into this project. Can you tell me, like, why, from your perspective, like, you started something new, why do you think people actually were ready to contribute rather than using something that is already on the market, proprietary, or build their own? Why do they see potential in OpenHands?
Yeah, I would say a few things. One is that this is a tricky technology to build by yourself, just using off-the-shelf stuff. The whole harness layer is there's a lot of research and know-how that goes into building a good, robust harness, especially one that can like switch between different models and still perform very well across models. So like one big thing that we do with OpenHands is we benchmark it with literally hundreds of different models to get a sense for how accurate is that model, how much does it cost, how fast is it, and we can point to those trade-offs between different models. We can say, hey, this one is it's 80% as accurate, but it's a tenth of the cost, and so like maybe for these use cases you should use this model. That's the kind of stuff that like it costs money to do, so it's not easy for everybody to do themselves, and you get some like you get some boost by kind of doing it once for this public harness rather than everybody trying to do it individually. And there's a lot of interesting work that goes into how you connect to skills in MCP, how you manage the context window as like a conversation goes on and the context grows and grows. There's a lot of like interesting work that goes into all that. So it's not the kind of thing that like every person or every company is going to want to like build themselves. There are some off-the-shelf things like Claude Code, for instance, but it tends to be kind of a black box, right? You're getting something that just works, right? You can just turn a key and start working, but it only really works well with Anthropic's models. If you want to switch to OpenAI, you can kind of hack it to do that, but it doesn't work very well because it wasn't designed to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't really build like plugins or extensions or like build on top of it in the same way you can with an open source product. So like we actually offer our entire harness is available as an SDK where you can get access to all the internals. You can build your own harness with it. You can build anything you want that uses agents under the hood, and that's a really powerful way to work with it. We've kind of taken care of all the creating all the Lego bricks that you would need to build your own agents. Then you can just start piecing things together.
Okay, I love this. And you have raised a few topics that I'd like maybe later a little bit, elaborate on that. So the first one is that, so there is, alongside with open source, you are running commercial version. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. How hard is it for you to draw the line? What stays free and what is paid? Without, alienating all the community that is contributing to the open source product.
Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. I think it's very important as an open source company to be very clear with your community where that line is, and to hold to that line. And for us, it's anything that's valuable for an individual developer working on their laptop, or even like inside of a VM. That's all free and open source, right? We want to basically democratize access to this technology. But the second you've got a team of developers, or like a larger organization that's trying to use this technology where they want authentication and authorization, they want role-based access control, they want audit logging, all the stuff that like big organizations care about, that's what we hold back. So we're not trying to monetize your average developer, your average hobbyist who's just trying to get work done. We're really trying to take it, when there's a team of developers who have a budget, we're asking those folks to contribute back to the ecosystem by paying us money.
Okay, got it. That's really, as you say, really straightforward, and it's clear. And do they also get like extra as a bonus the ability to like support? Is support included? So I was just like one of the questions that immediately popped up in my head is like when you have so many contributors to your ecosystem, it also might be a challenge to control the quality of the code and that is poured into your platform. So tell me, how do you handle it from this open source perspective and also from the paid perspective?
Yeah, we definitely get a lot of just like drive-by PRs, right? People who just throw an agent at it and say like fix a random issue, and they just want to get a badge that says they contributed, something like that. We've had some luck by having a pretty rigorous like PR template that people have to fill out, including a little checkbox that says I am human, which the LLMs will not check. So just doing a first pass at every PR, making sure that somebody's put in the minimal effort to like click that box and say, hey, I've tested this out, and fill out like a human written PR description, things like that. It weeds out a lot of the just like low effort stuff. And then we do have, a chunk of our engineering team, we kind of like round robin support for giving feedback on pull requests. We actually have some folks in the community who are great, and like we've added certain people in the community who are not OpenHands employees who are official maintainers of the project, who can also review and help get things merged, and who can have some taste into like what kinds of changes are going to be good for the code base, what are going to like break our patterns, things like that. So to some degree, the community is actually helping to maintain the software itself. And then, our engineers can step in to supplement wherever necessary.
How big is your engineering team? I'm just curious whether you use your own product. So,
yeah, no, we use our own product very extensively. Yeah. We've got probably close to like 15, 20 engineers, something like that. And I would say everybody at the company actually uses OpenHands in some capacity. Even the non-technical folks will find uses for it. Like we've hooked it up to HubSpot, so our sales folks can ask questions about their leads and figure out like where, who they should be targeting, who they should be talking to. But yeah, we use OpenHands a lot within the organization. Both like individual developers will use it for their like day-to-day, just trying to get stuff done. And then increasingly we're creating full automations with OpenHands to do things like code review, where an agent is actually getting triggered automatically and then doing something on behalf of the team.
Got this. Okay. Another thing that you have mentioned earlier is the cost. And cost, it becomes the top priority for many organizations right now. Even today in the morning, I saw a very interesting like live anecdote post on LinkedIn where founder of a company mentioned that Anthropic is a scam because he has just received over $100K bill for the agent, for the model. And I'm wondering, how can OpenHands help companies like that, get the visibility into what agents do and avoid that kind of shock of receiving before they actually receive these bills, that build up on the usage.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One is that at the enterprise level, we do have what we call the agent control plane, which really helps organizations understand what agents are in place, what are they doing, what do they have access to, and how much are they costing, right? And you can even start to track like the ROI for each individual agent. Like we use this to track the ROI on our code review agent. We can look at how much is it spending on each code review that it does. How often are its comments actually getting incorporated into the actual pull request feedback? Like, is it just generating noise, or is it actually generating some signal that people are accepting and helping get code reviews across? And we can compare those numbers against each other and say, hey, yeah, okay, we're actually getting a lot of ROI from this one. It's costing us X, but it's driving Y amount of productivity. That seems like a good spend. Or not. We can say, hey, this is actually just generating a lot of noise. We need to improve it, or we need to shut it down. So we've got that agent control plan to really give organizations and leaders visibility into what's going on, where are they spending money, and where is it actually driving value. And I think the other piece of that is the fact that we're model agnostic, right? I would say increasingly you have these open source models that are competitive with Anthropic, things like GLM, Minimax, Kimi. There are some really great open source models that are coming out that are right at the edge of the frontier. And often they cost 10% as much as Anthropic's frontier models do. And so it's really useful, A, to have a harness like OpenHands that can just swap models on the fly without degrading performance. And then two, to be able to use the control plane to even like A/B test two models. Like we actually A/B test. We're A/B testing now Minimax versus Opus to see, okay, how much of a cost reduction do we get by using Minimax, and how much does quality drop if we use Minimax? Is it a 10% drop in quality for a 90% reduction in cost? That's probably worth it, right? And so we can constantly be doing experiments like that and making sure we're actually optimizing for the cost to benefit that we get from different models.
The point that you have mentioned, many of these models that come at a fraction of the cost, they originate from other countries. Many say like they can be Chinese and they are a lot cheaper. They are not as intelligent as Anthropic or ChatGPT, but they still do the task.
Yeah.
Do you see also there is other like issues that can come with adoption of these models, like throughout different enterprises?
Yeah, I would say, the smaller models tend to be quirkier. They tend to have a little bit more personality from model to model. They tend to be better and worse at different tasks or different aspects of tasks. Like one might be much better at planning than execution. One might be better for like very long running tasks, things like that. So it's very much worth experimenting with different models for different use cases. You shouldn't just be like, hey, we're all in on Minimax or we're all in on GLM and like we're never going to change. Like I think having a bench of models that you can pull from is super important. And there is like some operational risk to, using one of these kind of like less supported, non-US models.
Like data exposure, would that be one of the like things that you can, like one of the concerns?
The data exposure is actually even lighter because you're going to be self-hosting this model yourself. You're not sending the data to anybody. So because it's open source, like you kind of own everything. So that part is actually really nice. Whereas if you're using Anthropic's models, you kind of have to trust Anthropic or AWS or whoever's hosting the model that they're not taking your data. So we work with some like hedge funds, for instance, who just they will never send their source code over to Anthropic, no matter how many guarantees they get that it's not going to show up in training data. It's just too valuable to ever send over the wire. So they want to run OpenHands plus an open source model inside of their data center. No, it's more on like the quality side of like, you never really know what these models may or may not do under some particular edge case. So I wouldn't necessarily put it up as like a customer facing chatbot on your website. You might want to use Anthropic for that use case, but for doing something like managing your dependencies internally, adding unit tests, things like that, pretty safe to be using an open source model there.
Yeah, I got this. You mentioned that your sales team is running, using AI agents to help them with identifying their leads, etc. So if you could tell us who are your customers, right? Customer profiles, who would be your ideal customer and why they are using or should be using OpenHands?
Yeah, I would say generally we work with organizations that have like hundreds to thousands of engineers. They tend to be operating at a scale where they really need some like organization level visibility into how agents are getting used in their engineering organization. They also tend to have the sorts of work that OpenHands is great at automating. I would say for your like day-to-day ad hoc work, new feature development, where you do want like a human like very much in the loop as that gets built. Folks have their technologies of choice. Some are using Cursor, some are using Claude Code, some use OpenHands. But it's kind of like every developer has their preferred agent there. Where OpenHands really shines is when you're trying to automate the like 30% or so of engineering work that's just kind of like undifferentiated, keep the lights on work that can really be automated end to end with an agent rather than having a human piloting that agent, right? So a lot of times these larger engineering orgs with hundreds or thousands of engineers, they have work that's getting done at scale, like managing dependencies, managing documentation, hitting test coverage targets, things like that, where they can use OpenHands to automate this, where agents are now running automatically on a schedule or in response to events coming out of Datadog and Slack and GitHub, rather than being like pair programmed, co-piloted with an engineer. And that gives you just an order of magnitude more productivity gains because you're no longer taking up space in an engineer's brain. But those problems really only crop up at scale when you have, dozens of teams all kind of working together, and you can start to build a platform on agents. And they also tend to be more in like highly regulated industries. So a lot of finance, healthcare, cloud infrastructure, things like that. Those types of companies, I would say, they tend to have a lot more of that keep the lights on type work that can be fully automated. And they really like that we are open source. We can be totally self-hosted inside of their cloud or inside of like an air-gapped data center. They really like that, the level of control we're able to give them and the level of like sovereignty we're able to give them over their data.
That's a quite broad, like your pool of customers is rather infinite, right? Or like really broad. Got this. You mentioned about the augmentation and the boost in productivity for engineering teams. And I come from Ukraine, which was a very popular destination for software engineering outsourcing. Now I talk with my friends who are still living in the country, and they talk about this kind of shift. There is a visible shift in demand for software engineering development and outsourcing. And I do believe that you, with your product or companies similar, you contribute to the shift in demand for software engineering.
Yeah.
Do you believe so? We probably can take off the table that the software engineers will not be completely replaced by AI agents, but what is your vision for software development in the future?
Yeah, I would say, the future I see is a world where we have 10 times as much software and we need, more software engineers as a result, right? There might be, a single engineer might be able to take on more lines of code or more surface area, however you want to measure it. They might be able to get more done, but what we're seeing is just more things getting built, right? If you go to any software company today and say, like, what would you do if you had infinite software engineers? They'll give you a whole list of things that they're just not getting to because they don't have the resources, right? So I do think there's still a place in the world for software engineers, even as we automate more and more of the SDLC. You're going to need good systems level thinkers, thinking about, how is this software getting built? How are agents being pulled in here? How are they getting used? Right? Agents can never really be held accountable. And so you do need human beings who you can hold accountable for this very complicated system of software that you're building at the end of the day. I mean, agents themselves are software, right? I think the trickiest thing is going to be, how do we really introduce junior engineers, folks who are just starting in the field, into this work, because typically the work that we've given to junior engineers has been the kind of like rote, easily automatable work that we're now giving to agents. And so figuring out how do we take new graduates and really introduce them to the work of software engineering and get them used to the idea of building. I think that's still kind of an open question, something that the field hasn't solved. I think you see the same problems in legal. You see the same problems kind of in every white collar industry. The type of work that we were giving to entry level folks is now being fully automated.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And so that was the future, that like your vision for the software engineers. What is the other side? What is your vision for AI agents? Not in the scope of not in the timeline of 5 years, but let's say 18 months, as everything is changing so fast. So what would be your vision here?
Yeah, I think the trend we're really seeing is that more and more is getting automated without like a human co-pilot, right? Where the human's stepping back more and more from kind of like manually piloting one-to-one with an agent, and more kind of supervising fleets of agents. And it's really more, it's less like one human supervising their fleet of agents and more like a team of humans is supervising a much larger team of agents. Seems to be the right pattern. I would say the thing that I'm really excited to see emerge over the next 18 months or so is really stepping back from humans are reading every single line of code. I think an old assumption was a human writes every single line of code. That's definitely been thrown away. I think pretty much every line of code these days gets written by AI. I think we do still have a human reading every single line of code, right? We're doing pretty thorough code review still, and I think that's still appropriate. But I think more and more you're going to see certain chunks of changes get kind of automatically blessed as low risk and like easy to merge in without having a human reviewer in the loop. And I think once you kind of make that leap to agents are actually getting work merged into main without a human in the loop, you remove a major bottleneck to software development. It's a bit of a scary leap that you're no longer having a human review every single change, but it does feel a little bit silly that I'm reviewing every dependency update when an agent can very easily stamp this as like safe, not going to break anything, tests are all passing, like let's just get it in. I'm kind of just a bureaucratic rubber stamp at that point. So I think the more we can shift to full automation of the SDLC, where agents are merging to main, shipping to production, checking the logs in production to make sure that their model of what should have changed did change. The more we can automate that entire loop, the greater the performance gains we'll see.
Got this. And well, the last question would be, what companies that are still thinking whether adopt AI agents, whether they're hesitating, they are not sure whether they can trust, what would be your advice to these companies?
I mean, I would say you have to start at this point. Like I know of almost no company that hasn't adopted agents at some level of scale. Whether you want to give, full-blown access to every developer to have access to like Claude Code on their work laptop, that's a little bit scary, right? But you need to be experimenting to some degree. And I think starting with use cases like code review that can be read-only, that are just like outputting information for you to act on, or an agent that is like scanning your Datadog logs and like servicing up insights, things like that. Those are like very low-risk ways to start with agents in order to start getting your hands wet and start seeing like start getting your hands dirty and start seeing like what works and what doesn't, and where you should be focusing your attention.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on. Motivation for every company to get their hands dirty, to actually experiment, as you put it, and see what are the benefits. Thank you, Robert, for your time. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. This has been really fun.